All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going deep, like really deep, into a classic, Plato's Apology.
That's right.
And actually, you, our listener, suggested this one, which we love. So just to recap quickly, Apology is basically Socrates' defense speech when he's on trial in Athens.
Yeah, in front of like 500 jurors. A huge deal.
Exactly. Our mission today, well, we're trying to distill those core arguments, the historical context, what Socrates is saying, and why it all still resonates today, without getting lost in the weeds of ancient Greek philosophy.
Right, because honestly, it can get pretty dense.
It can. So, just to set the stage, what are some of the actual charges against Socrates?
Well, they accused him of some pretty wild stuff, like studying things in the sky and under the earth. Basically what we call science or philosophy today. They didn't like him poking around in those areas.
Like he was overstepping some boundary.
Exactly. And they said he made weak arguments look strong, like some kind of rhetorical trickster. And then, maybe the most damning, they claimed he was teaching all these things to young people, corrupting them.
Oh, so this is where the whole corrupting the youth thing comes from.
Yep. Now, some of this came from long-standing rumors. Socrates had a reputation. But there were also more formal charges brought by this guy named Miletus. So it's a mix of old grudges and some newer stuff.
Interesting. So how does Socrates respond to all this? What's his defense strategy, right out of the gate?
Well, from the start, he contrasts his speaking style with his accusers. He points out how eloquent they are, very skilled orators, but he insists they're twisting the truth.
Ah, so style over substance.
Exactly. He says, look, I'm going to speak plainly and honestly, maybe not so fancy, but I'm relying on the justice of my words, not some rhetorical flourish. It's a huge statement right there.
Yeah, like he's putting his faith in the truth itself.
Absolutely. And then he tackles the older accusations head on, these whispers that have been swirling for years. He actually says these are the hardest to combat. It's like fighting shadows. This stuff is ingrained from childhood. How do you even begin to refute it?
Wow, that's a really powerful image, like fighting an enemy you can't even grasp.
Right. It shows how difficult it is to overcome prejudice that's been built up over time. But then he moves on to something really pivotal, the Delphic Oracle.
Oh yeah, the famous oracle. And it declared Socrates the wisest man.
Right. It basically proclaimed that no one was wiser than Socrates. And he was completely baffled by this. He was like, wait, I'm aware of how much I don't know. This doesn't make sense.
So what did he do?
He set out to prove the oracle wrong. He wanted to find someone wiser than himself.
So this is the beginning of his, philosophical journey.
Pretty much. He starts questioning all these supposedly wise figures, politicians, poets, craftsmen, people with reputations for knowledge. But here's the catch. He finds that those who are most highly regarded often lack real wisdom. They think they know a lot, but they're actually, well, not so wise after all.
That's a pretty big twist. So, the more famous they are, the less they actually knew.
In a way, yes. And this realization is central to Socrates' understanding of his own wisdom. He says, look, I know I don't know everything, but at least I'm aware of my ignorance. That makes me wiser than those who are clueless but think they're experts. He even suggests that human wisdom, compared to true knowledge, is worth little or nothing.
That's pretty humbling.
It is, but it also sets the stage for his whole gadfly analogy.
The gadfly. Like the annoying insect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He compares himself to a gadfly that constantly buzzes around Athens, stinging people, urging them to think about virtue, the state of their souls, and not just material wealth or status.
So annoying but necessary.
Precisely. He's basically framing dissent, even annoying dissent, as a public service. But you can see how this wouldn't win him any popularity contests.
Yeah, I bet. So how does he handle Miletus's specific accusations, especially the corrupting the youth one?
Well, he points out how illogical the whole thing is. Like, how can only he be corrupting the youth if everyone else is supposedly a good influence? He basically asks, if I'm the only one doing this, how are young people getting any good influences at all? He challenges Miletus's logic and even his sincerity, wondering if he really cares about these young people.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the not believing in the gods charge?
Oh, that's where he gets really clever. He basically traps Miletus. He's like, okay, so you say I believe in spiritual or divine things, right? And Miletus agrees. Then Socrates says, well, if I believe in these things, they have to be either gods themselves or children of gods. How can you accuse me of not believing in the gods?
Whoa, that's a pretty airtight argument.
Right. And he even throws in a reference to Anaxagoras, this other philosopher, to show that these ideas weren't totally out there. It wasn't just him making this stuff up.
So he's using both logic and precedent to defend himself.
Exactly. And then comes the question of death. He says, look, I'm not afraid of dying. What matters is doing what's right. He felt like he was following a divine mission to keep asking these tough questions, just like he wouldn't abandon his post in battle. To him, fearing death was claiming knowledge about the unknown, whether it's good or bad. What we should really fear, he argues, is wickedness.
Powerful stuff. It seems like he's saying that sticking to your principles, even in the face of death, is what matters most.
Absolutely. And he refuses to play the victim card, too. He could have brought his family to court to plead for mercy, but he doesn't. He says the judges should rule based on justice, not emotion. He's worried about his integrity, the jury's reputation, and the integrity of the whole system.
So he takes the high road. What about his proposed penalty? Didn't he suggest something pretty unusual?
Oh, yeah. He counterproposes that he should be given free meals in the Prytaneum, a place that honors heroes and Olympic victors. It was a bold move, almost like a joke, but also making a serious point.
So what was the point?
He's saying that his service to Athens, constantly pushing people toward virtue and true happiness, is a greater benefit than athletic victories. He's equating philosophy with heroism, essentially. And then, of course, we have the famous quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living."
Right. So even in this high-stakes trial, he's still emphasizing self-reflection and the pursuit of truth.
Absolutely. And even after being found guilty, he doesn't back down. He actually predicts that his accusers will face even more scrutiny now, implying that his death won't silence the questions he's raised. It's a powerful final statement.
So in this deep dive, we see Socrates as someone completely dedicated to his principles, even when facing the ultimate price.
Which brings us to the big question for you, our listener. Considering everything we've discussed, what does it mean to live a good and examined life in today's world? What are the unjust and illegal happenings, as Socrates puts it, that we have a responsibility to confront, even if it means personal risk? It's a challenging but crucial question that his story leaves us with.
And that's a wrap for our deep dive into Plato's Apology.
See you next time.